I've gotten the feeling from day one that this is going to be a show about a mental breakdown. And the idea of being inside Wanda's head as she tries to process everything that's happened. I mean, let's not forget, in Endgame, like, you want to talk about scary, angry? Wanda was coming to tear... she was ready to just rip Thanos into pieces, you know what I mean? And she is one of the most powerful Avengers, without a doubt. We've just seen bits of her power set, and all of this should be leading us into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, I think is the title of that one. You know, the whole concept of, like, the WandaVision show rolling us into Doctor Strange, and what I would assume would potentially be a House of M type storyline. This show seems like it's got an unlimited amount of potential, because it feels like it could go anywhere it wants to go. So that's super exciting for me. Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. Yes, I know. Much different opening than normal. I've never, at least not to my knowledge, gone back and ripped my own content to put on top of a new video. But after what we got in the latest episode of that show, which, if you don't know, it's there, it's here. We're getting ready to talk WandaVision. So why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat. We are getting ready to dive in, spoiler-filled, into WandaVision Episode 8, Previously On. And like I was saying, after we got this Previously On episode, which for me is like right there with the Halloween episode, is like my favorite thus far. Really, oh god, man, they're just... they're doing so many great things over there. But after a phenomenal episode, and then all of the issues that I had with my computer this morning, I was so jacked when I did the non-spoiler review. We figured it would be up by 5, then we could start cracking into the spoiler stuff, and the computer just isn't working. First it's the editing software won't load correctly. Then everything is just freezing up on the computer. I thought it was overheating, and I felt it, and it was hot, which drove me to put the computer actually in my fridge. I put it in my fridge for a half hour, hoping it would just cool everything down and let me get back to work. And it seemingly did, but as soon as I went to go into the editing software, just nothing working. And for 3 hours, I just was losing my mind, and then accidentally moving my laptop, the external hard drive fell out, and all of a sudden everything started working. So that's good. I'm glad the computer's okay, but almost even more detrimental is the fact that my external hard drive is not working. It has all of the video elements that I use, so you won't see any lower third graphics today, and it just also has all the content that I've put out for like the last year, like all the original hard copies of those files, and it's really aggravating that it's not working. And after that, following a phenomenal episode, I was like, I need to make myself feel good. I need a little win for myself. And I'm going to credit my buddy Kieran. Used to work with a good buddy of mine, Kieran, who's a big comic book fan. And that was our corner, man. Like, if we were talking comics. And typically we were talking the MCU. And right around the Infinity War trailer time, we kind of started spitballing ideas like, how do you go... what's the next big story that they could pull and incorporate into Phase 4, kind of like how they did with, Civil War and the Infinity Saga in general. And both of us, almost simultaneously, were like, House of M. Gotta do House of M. Like, you've got Scarlet Witch at play. Like, it seems like they're building that character to something. Like, that would be a super fun storyline to dive into. And the other big one that we called out way back then was the idea of doing, like, a secret invasion storyline. And naturally, both of those things seem to be happening. And because we'd been talking about it when WandaVision got announced, I kind of had a general idea. Like, you watch all of the things that, like, we've been talking about that Wanda's gone through in her life. Not crazy to think that she would have a complete mental, emotional breakdown, and as a highly powered being, having that kind of raw emotional breakdown could lead to some sort of spontaneous thing that creates an alternate reality that leads us to an House of M story for Doctor Strange 2. And that is literally what we are getting. And while I don't want to, but pat myself a little bit on the back for having a generally decent understanding of Marvel and the way they work, You have to give all the credit, though, to Kevin Feige, because even though 5+ months ago, I was closer to being on the trail than I was while I was watching the show, because they've set up so many red herrings, so many Easter eggs and clues that lead the audience where they're going to go. I mean, we've talked about this. Feige knows this audience better than anybody. And it certainly seems like he knew we would pick this thing apart. I mean, I always go to the Grim Reaper helmet that's in between the floor and the ceiling in the house in that Bewitched open when Vision drops through to the kitchen. You never find that just watching it live, but when you go frame by frame, you'll find something like that. And that's something I think Kevin Feige is very aware of, and he doesn't like to tip his hand, and he does typically like to keep it simple. And we've said, like, multiple times throughout the course of the season so far, it's like, this show is engaging in a way that nothing else has ever engaged the fan base, because there is so much here. Like, if you're a comic book fan, and you grew up with these comics, or you have friends who grew up with the comics, or even if you just grew up playing video games and watching cartoon shows, like, there's so many Easter eggs and things that come from canon in here. There's just 8-9 different trails. I mean, even back in September, I said, just watching that trailer the first time, like, there is so much potential for this show to do whatever it wants, and it could go in so many different directions. And it was played that way perfectly, to the fact that, like, between Kevin Feige and, like, phenomenal acting from people like Catherine Hahn, we ate up some of those red herrings. And at the end of the day, after we watch this episode, it really does seem to be an emotional mental break for Wanda, leads to the Westview anomaly, and eventually, what could be a full-blown House of M storyline. If she expands this thing globally, you could literally be living in a real-world House of M story for Doctor Strange 2. And while I've been really falling down the rabbit hole of Mephisto and going, he's an entity, he's a being that's connected to magic that could feel or sense, and if something big happened, he might send people in. Well, it certainly doesn't look like it's Mephisto at this point. Based on what we saw with Agatha, it seems like it's all Agatha, man. It was Agatha all along, just not the Hex, and much like it says in her song. She was pulling all the evil strings, and those are the only strings she was pulling, because she's trying to figure out what's going on, because she felt that energy and needed to investigate, because it was larger, more powerful, and something that she had never seen in the world of magic. And that seems to be the clash that we're headed towards, and I am so about it, as I am also all about the White Vision. That post-credit drop, oh my goodness, was it so good. And, like, I remember when we got to the end of Infinity War and we saw, like, the corpse of Vision, and we were like, did you see how he got, like, more gray? Like, he kind of looks like that White Vision. He didn't. He looked closer to normal Vision. This looks exactly like the White Vision, and for those that are unfamiliar, we will talk about the White Vision when we get to the end of it, because I don't want to just, live in this, hey, good job, 5 months ago of getting a general idea of what the premise was right, even though a lot of your theories have changed, as everybody's theories have been kind of changing and morphing as you watch this show, because that's just the genius that is Kevin Feige. So before we go talk about the White Vision and where we could be heading into the finale, we gotta talk about episode 8, previously on, and we start right at the top with something that I absolutely love, taking us back to 1693 and the Salem witch trials. But what's even better than that is when you see Agatha being dragged to the stake, and you're like, okay, this must be people that are, part of the Salem witch trials. They found a witch. It's her coven. And her mom is the leader of that coven. And they've basically arrested her and put her on what seems to be a real quick trial that, like, she was getting into dark magic and things above her level. Like, clearly there's a hierarchy in this world of witches in the MCU and inside of the covens, and there are things that she was not prepared to learn about or know, and things that are too dark to even mess with. She was messing with them, and I love when Han is like, look, I didn't do anything wrong, man. I followed the rules. I just bent them to my will. Like, I took what was given, and I figured out loopholes and ways around it to learn this magic. And you watch this circle of witches, like, start blasting her with this blue energy as they're chanting, like, an incantation in Latin. And Agatha is in... Catherine Hahn, by the way, crushes it this whole episode. I mean, her finally being able to just be Agatha and not have to be Agnes, so enjoyable to watch. And man, like right out the gate, she is just giving it to you. You know, she's screaming. You can see like the energy creating like an almost like one of those transparent type glows in her neck. Like she is in a lot of pain, and then all of a sudden musters up enough of whatever it is that she's been teaching herself to use her dark magic against everybody else. And there are those like blue strands that are connected to her flip purple, and she just starts sucking all of their magical energy, their life force. Like you see all of the magic just, and then all of them drop as like, you know, I mean, they basically look like corpses. You know, I mean, they've been sucked down to like where they're almost nothing. The wrinkles and the aging, like she's literally sapped them of their life force. And then the person who's in charge, we find out, is her mom. When she says, "Mom, like, I could be good," and her mom's like, "No, you can't." And she fires up her own charge, which was dope. Like, I don't know if this is like part of being like the head of your coven or whatever, but when Agatha's mom lights up her power, the magic actually trickles up to her head and created like almost like a crown. It was really, really cool looking. But very much like everybody else, eventually Agatha is able to like do some kind of spell behind her back so that she can break free of like the magical handcuffs that she's in. And then turns her mother's power against her, sucks her dry, and off to live her life, I guess. We have no idea what happens after that moment. No idea if she's come into contact with any other, you know, magical beings, if she's working with any magical beings. All we know is that she clearly survived the Salem witch trials, and then she ended up in WandaVision. And it would seem, based on what we see in this episode, that Agatha just went about living her life as a witch, probably draining people of their, you know, energy or life force to continue to live, give herself more power. And now, while she's just been living, boom, this massive amount of energy shows up out of nowhere. And she's like, I gotta go investigate. So we pick back up after our Salem witch trials. Oh yeah, and then of course the last thing that she grabs is the brooch. The brooch was her mother's, which is kind of a cool little bit. And then of course could destroy or dash a lot of theories about there being like 3 people around whatever this is, because there are 3 beings in that brooch. Doesn't mean anything. That brooch didn't belong to Agatha, it belonged to her mom. And I mean, maybe there's still a play, but like I said, the way it feels like Agatha is the big bad of WandaVision. So anyway, so we see her take her brooch, and then we jump back to where we left off last week. You know, Wanda is in the middle of this witch's lair that is just amazing for so many reasons, and Agatha is just kind of going into it, you know, kind of talking about how like the afterglow of this place when I arrived, and all like feeling all of the different spells working at the exact same time. It's like energy I'd never seen before. And then she kind of gives us like a history teaching lesson on magic, right? Like, you know, Wanda goes, "Who are you?" And she's like, "Who are you? Do you know, like, what you just did? How much power that takes? Who are you? You know, like, you created this crazy world. That's all your own. You made your own reality. All this power coming off of you, and you don't know basic, like, incantations? Like, you know, Wanda goes to use her powers, and Agatha kind of laughs. She's like, "Babe, look. See there, on the 4 corners of the room, on those pillars? Yeah, those are all runes. And those 4 runes, you know, together create a basic protection spell that basically makes any outside magical force null and void. And the only person that can practice magic inside of this area is Agatha." And she's like, "How can you be creating all this and not know the very basics of magic?" And you hear her go through things like, you know, we find out for sure that, like, you know, she said, she's like, "I was so close to figuring things out with Pietro." You know, she's like, fake Pietro, who I call Pietro. She's like, "I was so close." And then, you know, obviously, I wasn't, but like for that, she was, you know, she had to use a possession spell, you know, like, because one was like, "That was you?" She's like, No. That was my eyes and ears. You know, basic, you know, possession spell So who is she possessing? Makes me think it's not Nightmare. It's definitely not Mephisto. Maybe it could be Dottie, which we were theorizing. Like, Dottie doesn't ever seem to be on screen the same time as Pietro is, and Dottie is also not on the WO's board of, like, people who come from Westview. Granted, there's only the people that show up in the show, but, like, she was a main character focus for an episode and doesn't end up on the board. Maybe that is someone from the outside. Maybe that's someone that, you know, Agatha is working with, or Agatha knows. I don't know, because then why would she possess her unless she needed to be the eyes and ears? But nevertheless, like, not Nightmare, not Mephisto. I don't know if it's anybody, right? Like, it might literally be nobody. Just someone that she took control of and changed so that it looked sort of like Pietro to try to trick Wanda. And at the end of the day, if that's what it is, Evan Peters was just a meta casting joke by Kevin Feige to really steer us off the path that we're going on. And as frustrating as that might be, and what feels like a bit of a waste, like, Evan Peters is so talented, you'd want to keep him, you'd think, in your chips that you're playing with. But nevertheless, I mean, if that's what it is, disappointing, but, like, also kudos to you, Kevin, because, man, do you know how to troll the fan base? And I'm not even mad, because everything else has been so good. So we get this, you know, she kind of goes through, like, the possession. She mentions, like, necromancing being out of the question because the real Pietro's body was on another continent and full of holes. You know, so she's got that, and then, you know, she talks about mind control. You know, take a vulnerable being, take over mind control, no problem. Transmutation, I could turn this bug into a bird, but it took years, maybe centuries, of studying just to be able to hold a basic, like, illusion. And yet Wanda's got not just an illusion going, but she is controlling thousands of people, and, as Agatha says, is basically doing magic on autopilot, man. Like, you go all the way out to the outskirts, and she's still in control, even if nobody's moving out there. Like, she is in control of everything, and it's driving, you know, Agatha nuts, because she doesn't know how you could have that much power and not know basic magic. And we know that she wouldn't know anything about basic magic, because she doesn't know that she's a magical being. You know, prior to being experimented on by Hydra, Wanda was just a girl, or so we think. We learn some more stuff from Agatha later on, and honestly, after the setup, I love the way they use Agatha and the way that Han delivers everything she delivers the rest of the episode. Like, you literally watch her methodically poke and prod Wanda into taking her to the correct memories that she needs to see in order to formulate her theory, and figure out on her own what's going on. So it's definitely a lot of fun to watch the two of them go back and forth. And what Han's so good, man. She's like, you know, let's take a look at some, like, real life reruns, honey. And she steals a piece of her hair, creates some sort of spell, and throws it towards the door. And by the time you watch the whole episode, it feels very apparent that taking the hair is what connected her to Wanda, but they're Wanda's memories. And if you're going to enter any, Wanda kinda has to trigger it. And if you watch, before every door opens, Han is asking questions, she's asking specific questions, she's probing and pushing Wanda to open up her mind to take her to the places that she needs to go. And I love that concept. I love how they execute that concept by doing a Ghost of Christmas Past, so to speak. You know, like, Agatha can take you to these different places, although it's Wanda, I think, taking them there based on what memories are being triggered. But then, like, once you're there, you can kind of view it, and then, like, you can actually live it. And, like, Wanda kind of disappears into, you know, what's going on so Agatha can watch. And I love that, because this felt like it was going to be an episode that went back, right, and answered all the things that we needed to have answered, or at least some of the things that we needed to have answered, the big things. Wanda created all of this based off of just a random moment of intense grief. Agatha felt that power She came to investigate and has been living inside and running around trying to figure out what it is Wanda's doing. And, to fill in those gaps, you go backwards. But you could have just done very similar to episode 4, where we just jump and kind of start off wherever, like we started with Monica right after being snapped back in Endgame. Could have done something like that. But it kind of detaches you from the characters a little bit. And in doing it this way, we're able to have Agatha and Wanda from the present be active throughout the whole episode, and it allows us to have their stories intertwine and kind of be told at the beginning and then the rest of the episode, but kind of do it all at once rather than just like having to bounce back and forth. Like, we're always with these two people the whole episode. And I loved that concept because it was an easy way to go back but continue to move everything, including what's currently happening in the present, forward. So it doesn't feel like, oh, we stopped at this moment in time, we went back, we watched all this stuff, and then next week we come back to this moment in time. We've been in the real moment the whole time. So obviously the first place that Wanda takes Agatha is to Sokovia, the night Wanda's parents are killed. And this answers one of the biggest questions that we've all been wondering. And, I'd kind of thrown out there more than once that, like, maybe, like, sitcoms were the thing her and Vision did when they started to hang out, at the Avengers compound, but also, like, when they were out on the run for those, like, 2-3 years. And that was sort of true. We see that she's been watching the sitcoms throughout her entire life, and every moment that we go to, we see a sitcom somewhere. But it all starts with her family, and her dad was someone who, clearly must have saved up enough money to buy like a little DVD player and TV, and had stored up all of their, amassed this kind of collection of DVDs or rip-off DVDs. Some of the cases in his suitcase looked like they were knockoff DVDs. But we find out that, like, that's where the love of sitcoms comes from. It was watching these sitcoms with her family. And that really being the only positive time in her life, because after that it's just trauma after trauma after trauma starting on that night. So it would make a lot of sense. And her favorite show is, of course, Dick Van Dyke, which is where we start when this whole WandaVision thing begins. But what was cool is if you open up the suitcase, you see he's got I Love Lucy in there, Malcolm in the Middle, Bewitched, The Addams Family, Who's the Boss, I Dream of Jeannie, so even some shows that we haven't talked about kind of in that case. And she's like, well, my pick's not in here. He's like, I hide your pick in like a special place that doesn't go anywhere. And she knows exactly the episode she wants, man. She's like, season this, episode this, like the Walnut episode. And they throw it on and that's what they watch. And you get this kind of cool bit where they're kind of circling up for like family time, and the mom looks out the window. And also another theory that was shattered this morning, her parents not the two people from the commercials. A lot of people have assumed, oh, maybe those two were just repetitive because those are her parents. Nope, just actors for commercials. Maybe they will have some sort of connection somewhere, or there'd be a reason why it was those two people every single time, but seems to just be commercials. But nevertheless, her mom looks outside and you can see, like, there is some kind of war going on. You can hear gunshots, you see some people running. Yet inside this house, it's seemingly safe and filled with love. Something that Wanda certainly has not had very much of. And I love that, like, as they're sitting down, and the son's like, it's always sitcoms, all these sitcoms. And, they're like, oh, they get into, like, shenanigans or whatever. And he's like, what is what is a shenanigan? And little Wanda is like, it's like a problem, but it's more silly than scary, but sometimes it can be scary. Literally everything we've been watching thus far. Like, lining up, like, and that's how she sees things, right, from a sitcom. So, like, there is this, hey, at the end of every episode of WandaVision, all the problems are solved, everybody gets to be happy, and then you move on to the next thing where a problem will arise, but, like, it's silly and sometimes it's scary, but at the end it all works itself out. And that's kind of what's been happening inside of WandaVision this whole time. Sometimes it's silly and sometimes it's downright scary, but at the end of every episode, things, at least at the beginning, were seemingly okay because Wanda was definitely fully in control. So, like, I just like hearing her talk about that type of stuff because it's like things that are clearly evident in what's going on in Westview. Even like when her mom's like, like mischief, that always becomes fine. And that's like what I said. Like they talk about how the endings, it's always a happy ending in a sitcom. You always wrap everything up in 30 minutes, nice, tight, neat. Off you go to the next thing. And I just love that is something that latched itself to Wanda. And it's clearly something like she was thinking about. Like when you have that emotional break, like how can I avoid real life? Create a life that can always end with a happy ending, and all the problems get solved by the time you get to the end of that day. So I loved having that little bit of insight, and I love that the sitcoms and why they're happening inside of WandaVision is because that's the last happy memory she has with her parents. It's the last thing that she did with her parents. And then from there we see everything play out the way we know it did. They're watching TV all of a sudden, and it is like so jarring, and like it's made me jump 4 times. I've watched the episode 4 times today because computer problems, and all 4 times jumped every single time it happened because you're just like in this nice little moment and boom, explosion. Everybody like see it. It didn't even look like it just happened so quick, and then everything's just dark, and Wanda's like coming out of it, and you see her and Pietro, they're hiding. She grabs him and they hide under like this table or something that's got a bunch of rubble on it, and you see that Stark bomb. You start hearing the beeping, and Wanda's about to reach out to it. Pietro's telling her not to, and like it literally looks like she's reaching out to like stop it from exploding. And then Agatha pulls Wanda out, and what's cool is, like I said, when we go into these memories, Wanda becomes herself in that moment. So like you literally see the little kid slide, and when they cut from underneath that table, it's full-grown Wanda. And Agatha's just like, okay, I've seen enough. I'm just trying to confirm what I need to know. And she doesn't say this, but by the time you get to the end of the episode, you realize, like, she has been poking and prodding all of these questions and getting all of these looks into Wanda's memories to figure out if what she has been thinking potentially is going on is actually what's going on. So I love the way, like, it ends. She's like, you could have showed us her stopping it or doing something, but she wanted to know how long Wanda's been practicing magic and how long she's had her powers. So she's like, so did you do it? Did you stop the bomb? And Wanda's like, no, it was a faulty bomb. It was a dud. Like, we didn't know that there was something wrong and it wouldn't explode, but like, it wasn't me. And Agatha's like, let me tell you what I see here, Missy. She's like, what I see is absolute chaos and destruction. Your parents dead, yet the two of you are safe and sound and untouched. What I think is really going on here is I see a little witch who has an obsession with sitcoms and years of therapy ahead of her. But I don't see how this explains the hijinks that you're currently playing. I love that she said hijinks, because hijinks is very much like shenanigans, just like a different terminology. So it's like, kind of referencing what Wanda's been saying, but saying it the way Agatha would say it, I guess. But I like that she said hijinks because it's very similar to shenanigans. And shenanigans being what goes on in sitcoms, that's what, I love that mention. But like she said, she's like, I think you were a baby witch. You had powers. And when we go to the next memory, that's where Han is able to start connecting, right? But so, like, she asked the question, like, did you blow up the bomb? Because I want to know if you think you did it, because I know that you stopped it. And I think she says she uses a probability hex. Yeah, she used some kind of probability hex to make the bomb's probability of going off be far less so that it wouldn't, and her and Pietro could survive. But like she said, doesn't explain everything else that's going on. I need some more. And the way she kind of asks her questions and pushes Wanda, it's like, well, so this is how you respond to the death of your parents and the decimation of your cozy little, house. You and your brother decide to go join up with, like a terrorist, or like an anti-freedom terrorist organization. And Wanda's just like, we want to change the world. But Agatha says those things to get Wanda to think about, Hydra, because that's the next important thing. The stone, and where her powers technically manifest, at least that we thought, happens here, and what we see is Wanda kind of being experimented on, and you hear two of the lab technicians like, she's gonna come in and touch the Infinity Stone. The guy's like, every subject that's touched that thing has died. Like, do we really think this is still a good idea? And we see Wanda go in, and Wanda, like, the picture of grief is the way Wanda looked when she was with Hydra. I mean, like, cheeks and eyes kind of sunken in and shadowed, and she kind of looks like a shell of herself. She wasn't clearly in a very good place, and being locked down and experimented on probably didn't help any of that. But we see her, and they're like, first they're like, can you state your name and what your purpose is, or like where you come from? And she's like, Wanda Maximoff, I'm a volunteer. Okay, Wanda, go touch the stone. And she's really hesitant. Like when she walks in the room, she's like, so I just, and as she's doing it, the stone literally pulls itself out of the scepter and it's just floating in the middle of the room and starts coming close to her. And you see Wanda kind of locked on it, and right as she's about to touch it, it explodes, and just the actual, stone, the Mind Stone, the yellow stone that's just floating right there from the scepter is floating. And then, poof, that blasts, like all this energy, you see, like all this energy just hitting Wanda. And, God, dude, I geeked out so freaking hard, and then I geeked out even more when you were able to tie what this moment is to what it actually was based on what Agatha tells us at the end. But all of a sudden, coming out of the central glow of the stone, you see a shadowy looking figure that looks exactly like Liz Olsen in the correct classic Scarlet Witch costume. Like I said, it's all shadow. There's no real colors, but you can kind of make out the face. Looks sort of like Liz Olsen's, but the hair, the helmet that she's got on, the outfit she's wearing, it all lines up with Scarlet Witch. And then everything stops and she collapses. And you're left to sit there going, oh my gosh, the Infinity Stone. That's what it is. Like, if Agatha's right and she was a witch all the time, having contact with that Infinity Stone turned her into, the Wanda witch that we know, which is Scarlet Witch. So, like, just seeing that, you were like, oh my gosh, are they going to finally say Scarlet Witch in the episode? And when they deliver that line and how they deliver and what it means, even better than I could have possibly imagined. But this idea of the stone amplifying her powers is really interesting. And when they get to the next place, or before they go to the next place, after everything's done, Wanda ends up back in her cell, and what is she doing in her cell? Watching sitcoms. So I wasn't totally off when I was like, maybe when she was being experimented on, they had her watch sitcoms. Maybe when she was with Vision, she watched sitcoms, and that's what it is. And we obviously see that a little bit later with Vision, but again, stems from the parents, which was the thing I didn't see coming. So love that. Like, the sitcoms have been a staple through all of the trauma that she's gone through. And then Agatha and her like kind of reappear in the room, and Agatha's like, so I didn't get this right. Little young you comes in contact with the Infinity Stone and amplifies powers that otherwise would have just died on the vine. And this is the genius of Kevin Feige, man. When I say the genius of this guy, that is literally what happens to Wanda in the comics. Well, not literally, because it's not a stone. But in the comics, Wanda is born on Mount Wundagore. And trapped inside of Mount Wundagore is this being almost older than time itself, but older than like the Earth being a thing and humanity being a thing. There were these entities called Elder Gods, and then some of these entities have, like, it's been comics change things around, but like there were these Elder Gods and then all these other branches, and then there was only like 4 of them, and then basically these Elder God type beings were here before time in the comics. And one such was the God of Chaos. And I think his name is Cthon, or Chathan. I don't know how you spell or say Chth, but I think it's Cthon. And because I think he was a Cthulhu-oriented type character, like from that mythology and mythos. And these beings were also kind of like the Greek gods, I guess you could kind of equate them to. But nevertheless, like, beings older than time itself, and he was of chaos. And with chaos, he has this chaos magic that he can use that could literally destroy everything. So a bunch of sorcerers trap him inside Mount Wundagore. And he has the ability to escape, but not really. Like, he can take over, he can possess people and take them over to leave, but otherwise he's kind of trapped. So after Wanda's born, he actually makes contact with her and gives her some of his chaos magic, which, had that not influenced her, like, mutant power in any way, she would have, like, been like a basic telekinetic, you know what I mean? But because of this chaos magic that touched her, it elevated her to, one of the most powerful beings in all of Marvel Comics. I mean, her and Phoenix and Kang the Conqueror, these Nexus beings that, go past reality. None of that happens in the comics unless that Elder God makes contact with her and gives her chaos magic. So what do we get instead? Well, we're not going to get an Elder God. We get an Infinity Stone. And having the Infinity Stone, something that's been around since before the Big Bang, being that what's influencing Wanda and giving her abilities, or amplifying her abilities. That's the even cooler thing, man. Is like, Agatha saying that Wanda was always a witch means that potentially, like, mutants have always been a thing. And coming in contact with the stone, or the stone's energy, which is now the Hex, woke up, let's say, the X gene, turned it on in Wanda and made her powerful. I was waiting. I was hoping that, like, the dad would call little Pietro, like, hey, my speedster, or, like, what's up, future track star, like, something like that, to just kind of hint that he's fast, because then that really would solidify the fact that they had their mutant abilities. They were just, slightly heightened human abilities. But with contact with the Mind Stone, you get, like, full-blown abilities. And if that's the case, and if Wanda expands this thing globally, you could have the creation of mutants come out of the House of M story in the MCU, which is a genius reversal of getting rid of mutants in the House of M storyline in the comics. No mutants exist in the MCU, so have the House of M bring them in. And if it's that they've already existed and just coming into contact with this energy awakens that gene, if she goes full global by the end of the episode, or by the end of next week, or, by the time we're at the end of Spider-Man or getting into Doctor Strange, wherever it is, if it's a global thing, that could wake the X gene up and then create the mutants that we've all been looking for, and not have to use the multiverse to bring those mutants in, although it would certainly seem that, like, the multiverse being ripped open will bring over people like Deadpool. But nevertheless, like, that's a cool concept. Like, mutants have always been here. I just really dig that idea and that vibe. And like I said, I just kind of like that as we're picking it apart, like, Agatha is actually giving us more and more information than we knew by pushing Wanda to give it to her directly. So anyway, so she basically, comes in contact with a stone, collapses, and what's cool is right before Agatha and her have the conversation, before they go to the next place, you go back into the room with the two lab technicians, and they're trying to figure, like, okay, she's alive, cool, get her back in her cell. What happened? And they try to rewind, and every time they rewind, you see Wanda step in, the scepter is over here, and then it cuts, and Wanda's just on the floor. That means that maybe it was a vision. Like, maybe she was seeing something that wasn't there, that revealed itself to her when she touched the stone. Like, that whole beautiful bit that we saw, maybe that's just what happened in Wanda's mind or whatever. Or it actually happened, and using her chaos magic without realizing, edits real life video, like, in real time, so that when people go back, they don't see what happened. And that's something we've been seeing Wanda do throughout this show. Is cut her own video, and seems like she might have the ability to do that with anything that actually physically captures her on tape, which was kind of cool to see. So then, like I said, she's like, so you come in contact with the Infinity Stone, and now all of a sudden you have all of these powers. And she goes to her, I love it, she's like, I have a theory, but I want to know more. And she's like, like, you've got the death of your parents, and the death of, Pietro, and, what was your outlet there? Like, what was your solace? And naturally another door arises. They go through, and this time it's her at the Avengers base in her apartment room, and she tells Agatha this is the first place that her and Vision ever lived together. Her parents had just died. Her parents were dead. Her brother had just died. She was in a new country. She was all alone. This is the first time that we ever get to see them kind of hang out. And at this point, with Age of Ultron, we've seen them interact. But now, you're at the Avengers base post that, and you get this wonderful little sequence back and forth where, Vision does the thing that he was doing in the movies where he, was phasing through walls just doing it. So now he, waits, and Wanda can clearly sense him. And it's Vision, and he phases through. He's completely dressed, and he sits down. And we get to have this really beautiful little moment in time with Wanda and Vision. And for me, when I was watching it, this seems like it was the moment, the turning point moment, where Wanda and Vision both actively were interested in each other. And it is one of the sweetest moments that we get with the two of them on screen in the show. It's just they're so good. Their chemistry is so good, and to be able to do everything they've done and then film something that feels like the start of all that stuff and nail it was really impressive to watch. But what I love is Vision comes in, and Wanda's watching a sitcom. She's got Malcolm in the Middle on, and he sits down, and the thing that Malcolm's dad is building collapses on top of him. He's like, oh, so it's funny because he got hurt. And Wanda's like, well, no, it's not. It's funny because he's not hurt. And Vision's like, how do you know that? She's like, because it's not that type of show. That's not how these sitcoms work. And she kind of explains sitcoms a little bit to him. And, then he kind of looks to comfort her. He's like, look, I can't imagine, or I don't know what it is you're going through or how I could comfort you, but maybe talking about it could help. And Wanda immediately is like, what is talking gonna solve? Me talking to you, what does that do? Doesn't change anything. The only thing that could change something is me seeing him one last time. Getting to see Pietro one last time, that would make a difference. And Vision is immediately I'm sorry, that was not what I was trying to get out of this conversation. He's like, I want to understand. And, Wanda's like, look, I'm sorry. It's out of line, but it's she starts to describe her grief, and it's like a wave that just keeps constantly hitting her, one after another, after another, after another, until she's drowning in all of this grief. And I love that, she kind of puts this really bleak, that's it, that's all there is to me. And Vision's like, well, I don't believe that to be true. And she's like, why? He's like, because it can't all be bad, right? I've never had a connection, so I don't have any feelings towards being alone. I've always been alone. I've had no loved ones to miss, and to create a feeling of loneliness. He's like, so, just trying to understand what she's going through. And, after he says that, he's like, and if I can understand that, and based off of what you're saying, then what is grief if not love persevering? I can't have grief because I don't have anyone to love, and I don't love, and all those things would have existed in you, and now you feel all this other stuff. What is that other than you trying to get out the other side? love persevering through tragedy. Beautiful sentiment. And the way Bettany delivers it and Olsen responds to it, it is that moment. It's when he says that, it's you see that click, that spark that was there start to really ignite between the two of them. And it is just this beautiful, beautiful moment. And so much so that when we cut out of it and go back to Olsen and Han, Olsen, her lip is quivering and the tears are right on the verge of roll. She is crushing this show. And while she's got the real emotions forming, we got Agatha behind her, and Catherine Hahn just kind of, that was sad. That was real sad. But this didn't answer everything. And that's one of those things. Just that dichotomy between these two characters, and these two actors. Wanda really going through something, and Han's putting up going through it because there's something at the end of this that she wants. And based on what we saw with the the Salem witch trial stuff and her killing her coven, it would seem that she can consume magic or energy. And if Wanda has this level of energy, if somehow maybe she can consume it, that would give maybe Agatha the ability to wield chaos magic and literally destroy or take over the entire universe. And could be the reason that she's after these kids, right? Like, she realizes Wanda is too strong. If I don't have her, in a protection spell that shuts her powers down, going toe to toe, even though I know what I'm doing and she doesn't, that power, too much of a risk. But if I could get that power in a smaller form, and it would seem like maybe that's what she's going for. And I love that driving thing is what's got Han asking all these questions and pushing Wanda into these places so she can figure out exactly for sure what it is she's dealing with before she has to deal with it. Because I think in her head she has this idea, and she was trying to let it happen naturally, let Wanda just reveal herself. And once Billy started understanding that he couldn't read Agnes, and then obviously Monica coming back in, it kind of sped everything up for Agatha to get the ball really, really rolling. So I love that, like, at this point, I think when she looks out that window and sees Monica, I think she's I think I know what's going on. I got an idea how to do this. Let's see if we can get Wanda to show me exactly what I need. As she's kind of guiding her through, she again starts to kind of coax her into the next thing she needs to see. Like, man, your parents died. And then Pietro died. And, like, Vision was able to save you from that darkness. But then Vision died. So what could you possibly do without Vision there to pull you out of that darkness? What would you need other than him? And, like, and this is the point in the episode where it clicked to me that it was like, oh, like, we're going to all these places in Wanda's memories because Catherine Hahn is literally steering her right into those lanes. And immediately Wanda's like, I wanted to see him again. And she just walks through the door and she's in S.W.O.R.D. And this is one of those, like, moments where it's like, oh, God, like, I had theorized last week, like, maybe she went to S.W.O.R.D. looking for Vision's body to be able to bury it because when she woke up, it was gone. So I gotta find out where it is, and at the very least, I wasn't able to bury my parents. I wasn't able to bury my brother. I can bury the love of my life. And then I figured she probably got shut down and then came back in and did what we saw in the video. That Hayward is a sneaky SOB, and he is so easily and slimy that there's no way he's not connected to something bigger and badder on the science spectrum of villains. Like, if it turns out that he's just a dick, that would probably make me more mad than, like, Evan Peters just pretending to be Pietro because it's a meta inside joke. But I'm convinced that he is bad. And what we get to see with Hayward here really exemplifies that element. So she comes in and she goes, like, to the security desk and she's like, yeah, you guys have Vision. I need Vision's body. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, look, Vision died. Like, he deserves a funeral. I deserve at least that. You know what I mean? And it's that frustration of, like, every single person she has ever loved has died, and she's had no way to kind of close that door. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of times when you have grief, kind of getting to put that person in the ground or that animal in the ground, it kind of closes that chapter and allows that process to kind of start happening as far as, moving on from that grief. Wanda's never been able to have any kind of closure to people that she loves. So this is her moment. Like, the one chance I get to have closure, this is it. Give me his body. And then guy makes a call. Okay. And he's like, Director Hayward will see you. He's like, door on the side, down the hall, make a left, 2 rights, and you're there. And as she's approaching the door, homie's like, oh, wait, I gotta buzz you in. She's like, that's okay. Uses her magic and blows the door open. Which we saw in that video that Hayward brought. Like, you saw her, like, just blow that door open. And as we go through, you're going to notice, like, what we thought happened is not what happened. And Hayward made it look that way. Just confirming that he is not a good dude. But anyway, she goes in. And Hayward's like, Miss Maximoff, like, it's a pleasure to actually meet you. I understand you're looking for Vision's body. And she's like, yeah, like, I'm his next of kin. Like, he deserves, like, an end, not just, like, wherever. So he's like, and he's kind of going on, and she's like, why'd you bring me here? Or no, I'm sorry. So he's like, well, I have something to show you. And they walk up to the window. That window we see Wanda shatter later, and look down into that facility where the disassembled version of Vision sits on all of those different tables. And Wanda's literally like, why are you showing me this? And Hayward's like, this is what you asked to see. And he's like, this is what we've been doing. We've been trying to bring him back. And nothing that we've done, we've, dissected him, tried to reboot him, nothing works. And, like, he puts out there that, like, but we've never tried to turn it on with the actual power that started him in the first place. And Wanda's like, that's not what I'm here for. Like, I just want to have closure, basically, is what she's saying. And Hayward, like, you could tell, like, oh my gosh, the reason Hayward let her in, whole reason Hayward brought her, whole reason Hayward was being a dick to her, was pushing her to maybe bring Vision back. And instead, like, as she's getting upset, she shatters all of that glass and floats down, but not to take Vision. She goes over, and I think at one point, like, he says to her, he's like, we're not just letting you walk out of here with $3 billion worth of tech. Like, and she's like, he belongs, he's mine, I'm his type deal. And he's like, that's the thing, though, Wanda. He doesn't belong to you. Like, the thing that you are so caught up on doesn't exist anymore. And that's when she breaks the glass, she goes down, and she literally, like, puts her hand over his head and, like, trying to use her magic. And she's, God, man, like, the way she gets caught up, man, like, I can't feel you. Like, you're not here. Like, this is a husk. Vision is gone. And she doesn't know what to do with that other than just to leave. She's not a villain, even though Hayward is painting her to be the villain. What Monica said to her last week, like, don't let Hayward turn you into the villain. And that's literally what his goal has been, is like, look, I just want to turn friggin' Vision back on. I think that using someone with the power, like, powers that come from that source that, like, he also came from, could be the way in which to do that. And when he pushes her and it doesn't work, he just lies in wait for an opportunity. And we see Wanda get into her car, she drives off, and there's, like, a note on the passenger seat. And then it zooms out, you see them getting onto the parkway, heading toward that fake exit for Westview. She pulls into Westview, and what you see is a town that looks like it's struggling, man. Like, a lot of the houses look kind of run down and old and semi in shambles, and, like, the gazebo is under construction, and it just looks dirty, and, like, the lighting filter that they use kind of just gives you this feeling of despair throughout the entire town, which in turn kind of plays into that idea of Wanda not being evil. You know what I mean? Like, when this happens and she sees what's going on, the town is actually better off than it was previously, kind of like Pietro said to her. And maybe that's one of the reasons that she's been okay with allowing it to continue, because everybody technically is happier and in a better position in their own lives than they were outside of the Hex. What she doesn't realize, and I'd have to imagine that she has no clue, is that these people are literally trapped inside their bodies and experiencing all of this pain and trauma that's stemming from Wanda's pain and trauma. So I love that you got to see, like, her come into Westview and get this vibe that it's like, not a well-to-do town, not a town that's succeeding. I mean, even the Welcome to Westview sign, like we saw earlier in the season, it's beat up, it's dilapidated, it's old. But anyway, we get to see her drive through town. We see her see several people that we've seen in the show, including Dottie's husband, who's, like, putting up a thing on a board that's for, like, piano lessons or whatever. She drives onto her part of the block and pulls in to an empty parking lot. And she gets out, and you see just this open piece of land, like where a house had been. Like, a foundation is still there, but the rest of the house has been knocked down. And as she takes, I'm going to try not to cry, she takes out what was in the envelope, and it's a map. And it's a map that leads her right to that house. And where the house would be is a heart. and like hearts have been all over the show more than once. And inside the heart says a place for us to grow old. V. Dude, like the love story that's at the heart of all of this, and at the heart of a lot of her pain and trauma, has been so beautiful to watch in the snippets that we've gotten throughout the course of all of the MCU. But getting to watch her and Bettany really focus on that element more than being a part of something bigger, it just has created a relationship on screen that feels so natural, that feels so authentic, that when like you see that note from Vision, your heart breaks. And in time, man, with Wanda, because like it's like Wanda sees that part of the note and she looks around and basically is sitting there with like, this is what my life was supposed to be, in the suburbs with Vision growing old, and now I don't have that. And just like 5 months ago, I figured she has a full-blown mental, emotional breakdown. And when she does, she just kind of lets out a scream, and when she screams, you just see energy bursting out of her. And the next thing you know, it creates the house, and then right after it finishes creating the house, she like does a bigger blast, and it creates the entire town, and then we go inside, and you're seeing all of this energy, and it's all red, all this red energy, and then all of a sudden, yellow energy starts coming out and literally starts building Vision. The energy that comes from the Mind Stone. And one of the other things that I've always been theorizing is that maybe Wanda had to literally give a piece of herself to Vision to bring him back. We've seen that throughout the comics, I mean, Billy and Tommy are shards of Mephisto's soul. Vision had his consciousness via Wonder Man's brave waves or something like that. Like, all of these things that come into existence in the comics seem to stem from something else. And I sat there and I watched, like, all of this red energy doing all of the hex stuff and just the yellow energy funneling in to create Vision. And all I could think is that's the reason that, A, she might not be as powerful, and not be, like, her we've seen her slip on the control of the town, slipping slowly and slowly and slowly. Maybe it's because the Mind Stone energy that powers her is really, what's helping power, like, allowing her to do it all. Like, the chaos magic and the stone together is what's allowed her to do all of this. And if she had to give the stone element to Vision, that could be maybe a reason why her powers are struggling. If she had to give a piece of herself to Vision so that he had that moral compass and that soul to a degree, like Vision's soul, even if he doesn't have the memories, if some of that had to be a piece of Wanda, maybe that's why she falls into the hex herself so fast, why she doesn't seem to know exactly what's going on early on. And much like Vision said, like, at first I thought this was like a situation where you kind of did this unintentionally and didn't know that you did it at the beginning, but now you are knowing it. And again, it's that grief that drives everything, and just wanting to be able to have this one thing. And if in Wanda's mind what she has created is better than what she arrived to, she might think that she's actually doing something better for these people than the lives that they were living previously. And again, that's one of those things that makes her super sympathetic, doesn't make her evil, and even though she is the bad guy, it's not necessarily all of her own doing. Like, there are things that have caused some of the things to happen that would land her on the bad side of the scale. Now, to get to where we need to get for House of M, I think she has to be one of the big bads going into Doctor Strange, whether we see her show up in the Spider-Man movie or just in Doctor Strange as one of potentially two big bads, right? Like, we've heard rumors Nightmare could be there. That could still be a thing, but I think Wanda's got to be the villain. And the only way you get to that is if you get rid of those kids, man. You have to gut her to just be like, that's it, I have had enough of this. Nothing I do works, I'ma just do it all. And I think if Agatha takes those kids, if Mephisto is the secret guest and he shows up and takes those kids away, whether he absorbs them or whatever it is, the minute they disappear, that's the minute that we literally start to see the multiverse get opened, and this hex, for what I think will happen, expand globally. Maybe just the East Coast to start, and it could get us to New York, which could get us to Spider-Man and eventually Doctor Strange. But I think it could be a full-on global launch, much like the House of M, where she rewrites all of reality. The only way you can do that is if you take those damn kids. And after we finish, her story, we see how everything happened. She's inside the house, and all of a sudden, like, she comes out of it. We see, like, Vision and her standing, and then you see actual Wanda behind them, and then we swing to her perspective, and everything's gone. The couch is empty, which also, when they sit down, like, when Vision is finally open, he kind of looks confused for a minute, and then he goes, "Wanda, welcome home." And the minute he says that, then she turns black and white. And then he's like, should we watch TV? And they sit down before they get ready to watch TV, the way we've seen them at the end of all of the WandaVision episodes. They turn and have a legitimate, like, romantic kiss. We have not seen, like, that kind of romantic level intimacy between them throughout the show at all. And you see it right there at the top of the beginning of all of this. And that's when everything comes up, and Wanda looks up, and she's on a stage. Like, it's a set, and there's lights and cameras, and there's a studio audience section, and there's Catherine Hahn with her feet up, just clapping, like, all right, well, good job, Wanda. I figured it all out, so time for me to bounce. And she snaps, and purple-black mist disappears. And the minute she disappears, for the first time since Agatha made that threat of, like, you want to see your boys? You better do what I need you to do. All of a sudden you hear them screaming, and Wanda wastes no time, heads right for exit stage left, comes bursting out of Agatha's house, and nope, doesn't seem like anybody in the town is around. Agatha is in her full-blown costume and looking absolutely glorious, floating in the air with her purple-black, like, magic coming out of her hands, and, like, it extends all the way up. Like, you see the black going up into her finger. Oh, she looks so freaking cool, and the costume is just so spot on. Like, it just creates the vibe of what you want Agatha to be, just perfectly with the visual. And those purple things, if you extend them, they are wrapped around those kids' necks like they're harnesses, like, like reins almost. And she's just holding them there and kind of choking them. They're trying to run, they're yelling. It's right around their necks. And Wanda's, immediately, like just like, hang tight, boys. And Agatha, like, before, I think it's like before, like, Wanda can even get going, she's like, I know what you are now. And she's like, you don't understand how dangerous you are and how much of a threat you are, having all of this power and no idea how to use it. And basically what she reveals is that she goes, like, you were supposed to be a myth, like a being that could literally traverse reality and alter reality all at the same time. And that is chaos magic. And when she said chaos magic, I freaked out because, like I said, like, just that little bit we were talking about earlier, and like how Wanda got the chaos magic, like the deep cut ties that the words chaos magic lead to inside of the Marvel comic universe. Oh, I was so excited, and like knowing that that's, like, she can do these hex spells, but like it's the chaos magic that drives all of this stuff, this ancient, level of power. And while it may not have come from an elder god like it did in the comics, comes from an Infinity Stone. Maybe the Infinity Stones replace the elder gods, and maybe the Eternals can kind of take that place of, like, beings. I don't know. In some way, shape, or form, it seems like Feige is, because that's one of them rabbit holes. Like, if you go down, you will be reading for hours and so confused. But you could strip that down and make it a lot more basic and a lot more simpler to tie into the MCU story if it's, instead of these elder beings giving some of these powers to people, have the stones do it, which is kind of cool. But when she said chaos magic, I was like, oh, is she gonna? And then, yeah, sure shit she does, man. She's like, so, and then she says something, she's trying to knock her off the guard. She's like, yeah, my kids. And she's like, oh, yeah, your children, Vision, this whole thing, man, like, this is all chaos magic. And if that's true, that makes you the Scarlet Witch. And I lost it. Like, we have been waiting how long to have that name finally land on Wanda, and now post everything that went on with Disney and Fox, we understand that in the Fox deal, they could have Wanda and Pietro, but they could never say Scarlet Witch or Quicksilver. They could never be mutants as part of that deal because Fox had Quicksilver, and it was the Quicksilver. Evan Peters' Quicksilver was easiestly the biggest thing to pop out of some of those like prequel X-Men movies. That's an entity that you don't want to lose or give up. So yeah, you can take Pietro, but Pietro can't be an Avenger ever, and you can't use Wanda's real name or call them mutants. Now that everything is all under one roof, we can say mutants. We haven't yet. I think we will get there. I think the Hex could potentially turn mutant genes on the way Wanda was switched on. But we on mutants. But it certainly seems like we could be building to that place. And just hearing the word Scarlet Witch finally bestowed upon Wanda. Even when they pointed out in the show, like, she doesn't have a funny nickname. It was glorious. And of course, that's when that stupid end hits. And you're like, I thought we were going to find out what was going on with the kids. What was going to happen to the kids. Nah, we're going to have to wait one more week for that. However, not the end. We do, of course, get a second post-credit scene following the first one that happened last week. And in this, we go back to the outside world for the first time all episode. And we have Hayward, and he's on the outside. And last time we saw Hayward, last episode, he was talking about getting ready for a strike. And he's talking to a couple of his people, and they're like, I think everything's ready. He's like, cool, let's go. And they walk in, and you hear him talking about, like, who knew that, like, we tried to break him apart and turn him on thousands of times. You know, and when, like, just the amount, like, the number amount that he's talked about in, like, working with Vision just continues to lead me to believe that he has definitely been working on this since he's been at least the director, if not before that. But, you know, it's one of those, like, he's out there, and he's like, who knew that, like, all we really needed was a little bit of the energy that the original Vision came from. And you see that frickin' Stark Industry drone with the red magic kind of glimmering on it inside of a box, and then you see them turn something on. You can tell whatever's in this box is being funneled into another box, and as it lights up this other container, the being that is in the container is the White Vision. And as I mentioned earlier, the White Vision in the comics was, you know, Vision had been destroyed when they brought him back. He lost his color in the remake, like in the remodeling of him. They were like, let's make him all white. So, okay, he comes back. He doesn't have, you know, Vision's soul, so to speak. He's just the Vision. He's this AI robot. Kind of makes him like an empty husk, so to speak. Like, he can do everything the Vision does, but he doesn't have his memories. He doesn't have his emotions. He doesn't have his moral compass. So knowing all of that just on its own makes me go, oh, I think we may have just been invited to, like, the big bad finale, or part of, like, it's one of these things where, like, this version of Vision, if he can get into the Hex, he could cause crazy amounts of mayhem just by not caring about anybody. And you could see a situation, maybe, where Wanda and her Vision, and maybe even Agatha, have to team up to stop the White Vision. And the cool thing, like I said, is he's like a soulless husk. He doesn't have anything that would make him like a being. He's literally just a robot. It would be pretty cool to not lose Paul Bettany and to keep White Vision, just give him his soul back. And that happened in the comics. Eventually, like, you know, I think they based, in order just to give him like a general kind of compass, they based him off somebody else. I don't remember the name, but then eventually, like, to get everything to sync back up so that he could have all the memories, something along the lines of, like, Wonder Man being back involved, eventually brought back the original Vision. Well, we could bring back, theoretically, the original Vision, and considering that, like, Darcy and everybody knows the play-by-play of all the events of Infinity War and Endgame, feels like if you got the Vision back, he could get all his memories back just by going online and watching stuff. But it feels like maybe Wanda's Vision could inhabit the White Vision, and then that gives you Vision again, and that allows Paul Bettany to continue on. But, oh man, like the possibilities with the white vision being turned on and activated, and like seeing the actual white vision, not that like grayish, like, oh, he lost some of the pigment in his appearance, like that's a call out, a nod to the white. No, now we got the real one. And yeah, he's gonna be an empty vessel, basically. And that could mean any number of things that could happen, but it would be kind of cool to see our vision get out of all of this by taking over the white vision. However, at the same time, that feels like that could be something that would lead like this to end, and I don't think the Hex is going to end. So how we get there, I don't know. But man, am I so excited for next week. And it feels like it's going to be at least 90 minutes, if not 2 hours, based on the amount of runtime that we've gotten so far. So you get to the end of this, man, and I'm just so excited for next week. And I love that the episode gave us a ton of answers. Yet we still got some pretty big questions kind of floating out there on the periphery. And like, there are things that they could grab and pull in, but will they or won't they? We'll find out next week. But right now, it definitely feels like Agatha is going to make them 2 kids disappear, and that is going to lead Wanda to just full-blown losing it. And maybe something even happens with like the Vision storyline that also is like, Vision's not a functioning thing, the kids are gone, F all this, like just no more. Maybe that's what she utters, just no more, and changes everything. We will see in just 7 days. But until then, that's all I gotta say about WandaVision Episode 8, previously on. Now I want to know what you're thinking. It's the spoiler review, man. Drop all your spoilers, everything you want, everything you saw, everything you thought about. What did I get right? What do you think I got wrong? What could go different? Where do you think all this is going to end up? And how amazing was this episode? Where does it fall in your list? What was the thing that popped the most for you? Did this shatter all of the things that you maybe were theorizing or thinking about? Did it line up with any of them? Anything you're thinking about WandaVision Episode 8 previously on goes down below in the comment section. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the old C-Man as we approach our final week of WandaVision. Maybe there'll be something to cover before we get there. Maybe we'll go through a full-blown, like, this is how we think it could end. I don't know, but if you want to be here for any potential content, all the content that comes next Friday, you want to be here for all of the Marvel content as we continue to move through the MCU. We got Winter Soldier and or the Falcon and the Winter Soldier next, and then not long after that, we'll get Loki, and that'll lead us into Spider-Man. It's all great. You want to be here for all that stuff? You just like when I'm talking movies, TV, trailer reactions. You haven't yet? I urge you, man. Come join the Cinema Sit Down Squad. Be part of the C-Maniac Nation. Give a little support to the old C-Man if you dig what I'm doing over here. By hitting that subscribe button. Hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time, for the C-Man's Cinema Sit Down, I've been the C-Man. I'm signing off. Peace. Hey, what's up, everybody? C-Man here, letting you know if you're looking for some more C-Man content, well, you can find some right here and here. And if you haven't, you want to come join that C-Maniac Nation, you can do that over there. Till next time, see ya!